What's up, guys? Tyler here, and in this video today, we're going to go through a real fun topic, something that a lot of people need help with and are constantly looking for answers. I wouldn't say that this is the holy grail or the only way to do things, but this is the way that we do things and see a lot of success. So today, what we're going to do is go through two different sections. The topic is going to be scaling, okay? Scaling your campaigns, raising your budgets, getting things to a point where you can successfully make your business bigger. It's that simple. A lot of people will either overcomplicate it or just not realize how simple it is. Obviously, there are different quirks, features that you do need to worry about, different mechanics that you do need to be aware of. But hopefully in this video, I can kind of highlight the simplicity and how easy it can be. This is what's worked for me personally with my own money, with my own brand in the past, and still consistently to this day, as well as what we are currently implementing with our clients as well. So without further ado, let's jump straight into it. The first thing I wanted to highlight before we get into any kind of structures, systems, breakdowns, whatever, the first thing I need to note is this has dramatically changed or quite seriously changed due to the changes with iOS. And as things do continue to change in the future, this will most likely change with it as well. Currently, the structure is really, really simple. We do not start scaling until we find winning audiences and copy. That goes without saying. We're moving into a new scaling campaign. Obviously, with the current winners, if they're in a winning testing campaign, we're not going to change that. We're not going to stop that. We will continue to let that keep running. We will slowly raise the budgets and raise that thing as it goes. But in order to get budgets from a few hundred, maybe $1,000 a day up to 3, 4, 5,000 a day, it always makes sense to also create a brand new scaling campaign and go from there. This isn't to say that you need to have 5 or 10 different campaigns running at once. Simplification is better than having any kind of complex process where you do have a multitude of different campaigns, whether it's for scaling or testing. However, you always want to start with by identifying winners, winning creative, winning copy, and understanding what made those work. Move it into a scaling campaign, and then you move on to the next stage, which is deciding whether you're going to run it with ad set budgets or campaign budgets. At this point in time, my personal preference is with ad set budgets, just with the current instability of the platform, and also just given Facebook has been a little bit chaotic over the last month, 2, 3, 4 months. I'm finding ad set budgets to be a lot more stable, and CBOs are still consistent in some accounts, but I'm just seeing a lot more success with ad set budgets, and I do see other people saying the same thing. Again, it's always worth testing. It's not something you ever just kind of rule out. Campaign budget optimization has been amazing for us in the past to help us with scaling, but post iOS, where things are a little bit more chaotic and less accurate with tracking, we are finding ad set budgets to be a little bit more consistent. Now, once you've decided what you are going to do with whether it's ad set budgets or campaign budgets, you then need to worry about how are you going to set your budgets, right? It's really important to understand with scaling, you aren't to start with low budgets. Low budgets don't help you. They don't get you anywhere, and they set a false pretense of performance. They will set the wrong example, and there's another video that is either out or will be coming out that will talk about how your budgets impact your bidding, and your bidding will impact your results, and those results will impact what truly is a winner or not. So that's more to come. Now, in the daily budgets for ad set budgets, anywhere between 3 to 5x your current cost per purchase is what I prefer to start with. The reason that is, well, first of all, you don't want to set it at, say, $500 to $1,000 on an ad set budget. It just really blows out your bids, and unless you're manual bidding, there's just no point doing that. Instead, I like to start around 3 to 5 and continue to increase it from there. And we'll go into what it looks like to increase it further throughout this video. Within campaign budgets, given you're going to have a number of different ad sets involved, what I like to do is start at around between 5 to 20x your current cost per purchase. And again, depending on your risk tolerance, will depend on what you set these budgets, but it can start anywhere around these numbers. For example, if we're getting a $50 or let's call it a $30 cost per purchase, I mean, to be totally honest with you, I will more than happily go up to anywhere between $1,000 to $1,500 a day campaign budget to start with. So really that 20x is blown out, but rather than make it look over dramatized or crazy, 5 to 20x is a real safe number. However, you can go upwards of that, and whatever you feel comfortable as far as risk tolerance go. If you're very comfortable with spending more and potentially having it not go the way you want, obviously, you can set a larger budget, but anywhere between 5 to 20x is usually a safe bet to begin with. Now, that's the overall structure. It's not hard. You just need to know when you're ready to scale. You got to have your right tests set up with getting the right metrics that are spending enough so that you can understand and identify that they are your winners. Now, there is a new way to test based on the current reporting structure of Facebook with the aggregated tracking model now, and the delayed events as well. That's going to be coming out in another video. So again, it either might be out or it will be coming. So keep an eye out for that one. But once you understand and you've identified who those winners are, it's really, really important that we then move on to scaling as fast as we can, because it just means more spend, means more profit, hopefully. And that's what we're all here for. So let's go into breaking it down and how it works as far as decision tree. So everything that we do is always based on making decisions. It's based on assessments. It's based on making decisions and identifying why has something worked or why hasn't something worked. And so hopefully this decision tree keeps it nice and simple for you and breaks that down for you as well. If any of this doesn't make sense, make sure you watch it again. I've tried to be as succinct as possible in keeping this as simple as possible. Now, so the decision tree starts like this. After you've launched a scaling campaign, these days we need to wait. We need to give it time. That's why we don't go crazy with our budgets straight out of the gate. If this is your first time really trying to ramp up budgets, not only can it be a little bit nerve-wracking, but we actually have no expectations of how it might perform. So before you go too crazy with budgets, it's always important to be a little bit more risk averse, because you just don't know how your performance, your account, based on the data it's collected and based on how it kind of paces throughout the day, how it's going to perform. Every account's different. It's impossible to be able to predict how they're going to hold. Obviously, if you've got plenty of wiggle room with margin, you can be a little bit more aggressive. If you don't have as much wiggle room, or you're just around the KPI you need to be, you might want to be a little bit more risk tolerant and start with a little bit lower budgets to begin with. So within the first 24 to 48 hours, the first thing we want to do is reflect on if the MER on the store has been consistent or if it's been heavily impacted. The reason we're using an MER model now is it's the only source of truth as far as how a sale's looking. Facebook is not going to report how things are looking. So it's important to look at the store, understand what your current MER was. If it's a 3, a 4, a 5, whatever, use that, and then pay attention to, is that 3, 4, or 5 staying around that same amount as you're raising up your budgets? Meaning if you spend an extra $500 a day, and let's say you were getting $1,500 a day in sales, and then you double that and you move up to $1,000 a day. And the question I'd be asking is, how close or equal to are you at $3,000 a day in sales? Because that would mean that you're remaining consistent with your 3 MER. And again, every brand's different. Some will be more consistent, some will be less consistent, and it's important to understand if it's remained consistent. This is why I've kept it at a plus or minus around 20%, and make sure that there's no outside factors like any email blasts that have gone out sporadically, or anything that might be out of the ordinary. And there's no extra sales or anything going on right now, because that can really impact the determining the success of campaigns. The big thing with this that I think is extremely important that every media buyer or brand owner needs to know, you can't give more credit to Facebook than it deserves. So it's important to make sure that there are no outside factors impacting greater performance. Honestly, from our end, I always try to make sure that we are taking less credit where possible, so that we can also then, it can work for us when we are trying to ramp up budgets. It has a greater impact because we've been taking less credit than what it actually creates. Now, where we move on to after we've determined after we've asked the question, has our MER been consistent? What we want to do is, if it has, simple, we just leave it for another day, another 24 to 48 hours, just to be able to determine if things are going to remain that way. The reason we wait now for so long, not only is there that 72-hour delay in data that Facebook waits for, or Facebook is forcing us to wait for, it seems as though at the moment, when leaving campaigns untouched, Facebook seems to stabilize within 3 to 4 days. And when I say stabilize, I mean performance gets a lot better and a lot more consistent, and things just don't need to be touched as much. It can be hard and it can be difficult. And so that's why with the no, there's a decision that we need to take. But if things are consistent, it's just best to leave them, let things stabilize out, and then they will begin to get better over time. Okay. Then if it hasn't been consistent over that 24 to 48 hour window, then we need to take some immediate action and pay attention to obviously what's causing that. So there's always a reason. The benefit of our industry, and if you've watched any of my other videos, you'll know that the one thing that I consistently harp on about is the data doesn't lie. We will always be able to find an answer within the data about what has worked and what hasn't worked. If things have changed, there's always a reason why. It's always conversion rate, CPM, CTR, average order value. It doesn't matter what it is. There's always something. And so it's important for us to pay attention to that so we can start to learn what did work, what didn't work, and what actually attributed to the decrease or increase in performance. So once we've kind of worked that out, or let's go down the no path and spend a bit more time there. So if it's no, we need to cut any ad sets with consistently poor soft stats. So again, soft stats is CPM, CTR, cost per add to cart, anything like that. After 24 to 48 hours, we should at least see CPM and CTR will always be consistent. And so that's our first source of truth. But then being able to identify how outside of the ordinary or outside of the averages are we seeing the cost per add to cart, the cost per initiate checkout, the cost per purchase. If it's way outside the average and way outside the ordinary, it's probably fair to say that they aren't attributing to positive performance, and then you can start cutting them off. You do need to be a bit patient, and you do need to give it a little more credit because data will be delayed and we are spending more money, meaning there's a lot more data coming in that may not actually be presenting itself. So your costs will blow out, but you're going to know your account better than everyone. You're going to know what the averages are and what you're willing to accept or not accept. And again, it just depends on your risk tolerance. Me personally, on my own account, I'm willing to let things run even if they aren't looking good, because I'm willing to give it that 3 days. But that's just because I also know how to identify what's right or wrong within the data. But if anything's blown out, if the CPMs are 50% greater, if the click-through rate is less than 1%, I'm going to cut that because that's not along the lines of average for us. Now, after we've done that, the first 24, 48 hours are passed. What do we do once we've hit that 72 to 96 hour window, or the day 3 to day 4 of our scaling campaigns? We need to ask ourselves the question, were larger budgets profitable based on MER? Meaning, has it achieved what we're hoping it to achieve? Now, one thing to pay attention to here, it's extremely important. When we are looking at scaling campaigns, it is going to more than likely be less profitable than what you will see in smaller budget campaigns. That's normal. When you're spending low budgets, you are more than likely going to see better performance sales, but that is not an indication of what you're going to see at scale. It will always come down slightly just because you're reaching more people, having to spend more. And again, it's going to make more sense if you've seen the budget to bid ratio training that's coming out. Now, so the first question we're going to ask is, were larger budgets profitable based on MER? The key thing here, the key word is profitable, as in, are you at a point where your KPIs are acceptable and you're making money so that you can continue to raise budgets and continue to achieve better results? If the answer is yes, then you're going to start scaling intraday, which we'll go to in just a second. If no, then again, we need to come and make a final decision about what's changed and what we need to do to fix that and what we can do to get it to a point where it is going to be profitable. There's a reason why it wasn't profitable, but if we can't get to scale, it means that something else is fundamentally wrong before actually raising up our budgets. Okay. Was it the CPM? Has the CPM blown out? It's important to understand based on percentages that all of these are going to have an impact, right? And if you've seen the training of the full macro levers, you're going to understand as well that these are the ones that we are going to pay attention to in order to identify what has worked, what hasn't worked, and what we need to fix in order to get to a point of scaling. Okay. So what changed in performance? Was it CPM? Was it our return on ad spend? If it's our return on ad spend, one of these two are going to be the impact. Has our CTR dropped? And as a compounding effect, have any of these elements compounded together to actually create the decrease in performance? Because it might not just be one, it might be 2 or 3, and compounding together, it's going to create a much worse looking picture. These are the things we need to pay attention to. Okay, CPM and CTR are going to be absolutely accurate, 100% accurate on Facebook. Then your conversion rate and your average order value, if you're using Shopify, will be 100% accurate based on what Shopify reports. So you need to pull that data in from 2 different places. Okay. Now, let's talk about the intraday scaling example. This is essentially the process we take when it comes to raising budgets. You've got a very profitable campaign. Let's say you're very comfortable with the performance, how things are holding, and you really want to start ramping things up. You've got enough wiggle room on your budgets that you can deal with a plus or minus, or with a little bit of wiggle room as far as return on ad spends. Some days are going to be better than others, and on the days that it works extremely well, you can make a lot of money out of this. So this is how it looks. So the intraday scaling example, I've never shown it in this kind of example before. So hopefully this helps highlight, 1, just how easy it is, and then 2, the systems and the structures that we go through. Okay. So let's say, as an example, we start at $1,000 a day CBO. Now, this can be done at the ad set level with ad set budgets. The beauty of that as well is that you can completely automate that with built-in rules from Facebook. Don't have a training on that at the moment, but there is something I plan on bringing out around those lines for automated rules. So again, keep your eyes peeled. So let's say that we start at $1,000 a day CBO. The first thing we're going to do is checking out midday, making sure that it's hitting the KPIs. This is not your midday. This is the account midday, meaning whatever account that your time zone's in. Obviously, I know a lot of people out there are going to be in the time zone, the same time zone as their ad account, which is totally fine. But around midday of the ad account time, the first question we want to ask is, are we hitting the KPIs? Is the store profitable? Are we hitting the MER that we expect? If yes, the first thing we're going to do is double the budgets. So from 1,000 up to 2,000. And then from the next stage at around 4 to 6 p.m., where things typically taper off for a lot of brands, then we're going to see, has performance maintained? If it has, then we're going to keep budgets steady until the end of the day. If no, we're going to reduce the budgets by 10 to 20%. This needs a bit of detail. So let's break this. Let's go through some of the other stages first, and then I'll explain why we raise budgets, why we reduce them, etc., etc. So let's start with a $1,000 a day CBO. At midday, are we hitting KPIs? If no, we're not going to raise the budgets. We're going to let things hold consistently. At 4 to 6 p.m., is performance still bad? If it's not, don't touch the campaign. Okay, just leave it. We're not going to raise budgets, but we're also not going to decrease them. Okay. If performance is still bad, meaning it's outside of KPI, meaning the day's not profitable, we're going to then reduce the budgets by 10 to 20%. Okay. The reason we do this, the reason why budget decreases are a thing, for anyone who's done this will know it essentially sends a signal back to Facebook. Anytime you decrease budgets, you aren't liking how things are going, and now it's going to start trying to find new audiences. When you decrease budgets, it also decreases your bid, meaning it finds cheaper people. It gives you a greater chance of finding better customers. And more than likely, it helps restabilize performance. This is something that a lot of people don't know. It's something that a lot of people overlook. But for those who are in the know, will all tell you that anytime you reduce budgets before you actually turn one off, tends to pull itself back into a state of profitable performance. Okay, so again, this is day one. So there are multiple steps to this over the days, and I want to help highlight this and show you what it looks like. And again, this is a scaling campaign. So this is all proven variables. So we can be aggressive with this. Okay. If there are unknown variables or it's a testing campaign, I wouldn't advise this because you are still testing. And even if you run a test and you're seeing good performance for one day, it's not worth pushing it up because you actually don't know how it's going to look over a longer period of time. Okay. You don't have that level of consistency, and you can just have a fluky day or a lucky day. Okay, so start at $1,000 a day CBO, midday hitting KPIs, yes, double the budget. Now you're at $2,000 a day. You more than likely, most of the time, will not see it get to that total budget, and pacing has been a little bit worse lately post iOS. So you'll set a $2,000 a day CBO. You might get up anywhere between, depending on when you raise those budgets. If it's around midday, some people go a little sooner, some people go a little later. You might get anywhere between $1,300 to $1,800 spent. Okay, so it doesn't reach that total amount, but what it does do is it spends more than what you set at the start of the day, which is what you're really looking for at the end of the day. The reason we check at 4 to 6 p.m., and again, this depends on the accounts. Some accounts will see their best period at nighttime. Most accounts that we manage see their best performance between the times of 7 a.m., 6 or 7 a.m., up to around 11 a.m. So the reason we don't raise budgets until then is because we want to make sure it gets through the peak period. We want to make sure it gets through that phase where we're seeing positive performance, and then we can start ramping it up so it can accelerate through the middle of the day where things are usually a bit slower. It allows us to spend more, get the sales that we wouldn't usually get, and can continue to scale throughout the day. A lot of the time, this is assisted with automated rules. And again, this is not a training about automated rules. We will go down that path in another training, but automated rules are very important when it comes to aggressively scaling budgets. It just it just helps prevent anything from blowing out or overspending where it shouldn't be spending budgets. Okay. So 4 to 6 p.m. has the performance maintained, then you're going to keep budgets steady until the end of the day. Otherwise, you're going to reduce them to let it finish the day at a reduced spend to ideally pull the performance back up to where it should be. Okay, so once we're done there, what we're going to do, the next stage the next steps to this is at midnight, we're going to reset the budgets to what it started at the day before, or started at that day. And so again, the example here is $1,000 because here we started at $1,000. Okay. After that, if the day was profitable, what we're going to do, we're going to raise the budget by 20% to begin compounding our scale. Okay. So what we've done, and again, to give you an example, at $1,000, we hit the KPI, we've doubled our budgets. So the total budget now is at $2,000. At 4 p.m., if the performance is maintained, we're going to keep it exactly where it is, meaning we've got a $2,000 a day CBO budget now. Do we keep it there? No. At midnight, we bring it back to the $1,000. And then what we do is we raise the budget again at midnight, which can be automated with rules. Obviously, it's a bit more difficult when you're running on CBO campaigns. You might need something like RevealBot to do this for you. The next thing you're going to do, and that's just if you're running CBOs, you're going to raise the budget by 20% to begin compounding your scale. So the next day is going to look like so. Day 2, $1,200 a day CBO. Again, following the same decision tree. If it's not hitting the KPIs, do not raise the budgets. Leave it as it is. If the performance is still bad, then reduce the budgets. Oops, sorry about that. But if things are hitting the KPI, meaning the next day is just as profitable, right? Or if it's hitting the KPIs, it's hitting the MER that you're looking for, then we're going to double the budgets. Now, instead of the day before, which was at $2,000 a day, now we're at $2,400. Okay, so the scale is becoming greater over a period of time, over a very structured process. And so if the day before we finished anywhere around $1,200 to $1,800 spent based on that scaling campaign, we're probably more likely to finish around that $2,000 a mark, even with a $2,400 total spend budget. Okay. And again, this can be hard to absorb for a lot of people if you haven't experienced this yourself, if you haven't done this before. So please take a bit of time, write it down, give yourself examples, or watch the video over and over again until it sinks in. And if you've got any questions, you can obviously ask questions wherever you're seeing this, comments, emails, whatever. Ask questions. I'm more than happy to assist in helping get this across. And so the end of this day is going to finish at either 2,400 or with a slight reduction based on performance. Okay. Or it's going to stay at 1,200 a day or come a little bit lower based on how the performance holds. Now, there's one thing in here that I haven't mentioned, which is important to mention. These 20% budget raises are under the expectation or under the condition that we've moved through this process. Okay. So for example, if performance was good, then the next day we're going to raise our budgets. Okay. If the performance wasn't good, you do not need to raise the budget the next day unless you're confident the next day is going to be just as profitable, if not better. Okay. So again, let me explain that in a bit more detail. If this $1,000 a day budget did not double the budgets and it wasn't as consistent as you would have liked to have seen, you do not need to raise the budget by 20% for the next day. You can be patient. You can leave it at $1,000 and run it through the same framework in day 2 without needing to raise it up. And then only on the days where it is more profitable or it is hitting those KPIs that you do raise the budgets, then move to $1,200 a day. This assumption, this framework here is assuming that by day 1, it was profitable. Then into day 2, it was profitable again. And we're just going to continue to compound this. The reason I'm giving that example is because we've done this exact thing. Okay, I've done this for my own brand where we've gone, I think I started at around a $2,000 a day budget. Within about 3 days, we were up to it was around $3,500 a day or $4,000 a day on a campaign was what we started at. And then by the end of the day, we're up around, the campaign was at $8,000 a day. We had 2 campaigns doing it and we finished the day spending about $14,000 or so profitably. So, again, it's not going to be that perfect, that consistent all the time, but when it is, it goes quick. And especially when you've got 1 or 2 different campaigns running at any one time doing this, they compound against one another. Your spends go through the roof, but it's always remained profitable anytime I've done this. Following the rules so long as we've got automated rules, so long as that we don't raise the budgets when it's not deserved and that we bring things back down when it needs to be brought back down. Okay. Let me explain one other thing about this. A question that I'm more than likely going to ask is, why don't we keep it at the $2,000 a day that it finishes the day at, right? So what I'm going to do here is at this $2,000 a day. So doubling budget from $1,000 a day takes it up to $2,000 a day. Putting that there just for simplicity. A big question I've had on consulting calls, so I'm sure I'm going to get it on this as well, is why don't we keep it there for the next day? Well, the fact is, I've tested this. It hasn't worked for me. By all means, you can test it yourself. But the truth is, when you go from $1,000 up to $2,000 and you want to start the day there, Facebook has to pace twice as fast to spend your from spending your $1,000 a day up to $2,000. And again, if the training is going to be coming out around the same time as this, but there is another training called the bid to budget ratio. Basically explains that the more you spend, the higher you bid, the worse performance as a general rule. And so what that means is if we are profitable at spending $1,000 a day, but you aren't gradually raising things and you go straight up to $2,000 a day, the bidding system, the pacing system has to work a whole lot harder to get you the same level of results. And typically performance doesn't hold. It can, if you've got an extremely healthy brand that has extremely healthy margins, this can be the structure that you go with and you just keep doubling budgets day on day. But given the volatility of Facebook, I just haven't seen people be able to do that consistently. This way, resetting things and giving them 20% incremental bumps at midnight has proven to be the most consistent way for us to scale at a rapid pace while still getting our intraday budget bumps based on performance. So hopefully that is going to answer any questions that are going to be upcoming. So at day 2, again, we're going to be spending $1,200. Now, a big question people have is, well, how does this help you scale faster? Right? It might seem a bit slow, but the truth is this starts to compound. And so by day 3 is when you start seeing this. If everything's looked good day on day on day on day, what's going to start happening is the numbers start compounding because the daily budgets start to compound. Okay. There's 2 levels of compounding here. From the 20% bumps, so from $1,200 a day is going to start compounding every single day, but also the doubling of the budget also compounds day on day. Okay. So $1,200 a day goes up to $2,400 a day. And then once we come into day 3, we're up to $1,440 because now we're 20% above our $1,200. Okay. And so this is where the daily starting budget is going to begin to compound as well. Okay. And again, this is only under the condition that things have continued to be profitable. Depending on how Facebook is and depending when you see this, things can change, right? The stability of the platform and how we need to do things can change. It's a very dynamic and a very volatile platform. So don't feel, because I am not liable if the consistency isn't there based on the current volatility of the platform. It doesn't make sense to continue to keep pushing the budgets up if you're not seeing the results. And so you need to assess this on a daily basis. Please know that. I'm a huge advocate as well. If you are going to follow this structure, it is extremely important to understand how to set up automated rules. Rules are going to allow you to deal with any volatility throughout the day. It prevents anything from blowing out too aggressively. Rules have no longer been as accurate and as consistent given the current status with Facebook's tracking. However, there's still a way to use them as safeguards. And again, there will be a training, whether it's already out or it's coming out, that will cover that for you, okay? And at any point, depending on where you're seeing this, when you're seeing this, if there are any links to that automated rule training, I'll make sure that it's linked for you as well. So looking at day 3, we start at $1,440, okay? If we're going to double the budgets, it's going to be $2,880 today, okay? And so now within 3 days, instead of just going from 1,000 a day, doubling up to 2,000 and keeping it consistent that way, what we're doing is we're slowly also compounding the doubling of the budgets every single day as well. And over a period of time, this becomes extremely profitable, extremely aggressive. So it's all about stacking your wins, compounding your wins. And so I've only gone up to day 3 as an example, but by day 4, I'm not even going to try and do that math in my head, but 20% of $1,440 is going to be added on, and that's how you're going to start your day. So following this process, again, if everything looks good, within 4, 5, 6 days, you could be up starting at $2,000 a day CBOs. You're doing the gradual budget bumps so that Facebook can slowly learn how to pace at those budgets. And then by doubling the budgets intraday, for those who may not be aware of this structure, it takes the current learnings of that day and doubles down on that audience. Yes, your bids are going to be slightly raised if you are on auto bids, meaning it's going to go up to the same people it's found in the morning, and it might just start to expand that learning. But at the very least, it's going to use what it's already learned in the morning and start to, essentially just doubles down on what's already working. It's about compounding your wins and stacking your wins. And I can't explain it any better than what I have. If anything is unclear in this, please be sure to leave a comment, leave me a message, whatever you need to do. But again, the whole purpose of this training is to show you that it can be simple. Things have changed post iOS. We do wait a little longer before we go aggressive and how we set our budgets and how we structure our campaigns. But the logic is still the same. Facebook is still the same platform. Facebook still has our customers. What makes campaigns profitable or not only comes down to the 4 macro levers, 5 if you factor in LTV. All of these metrics don't change. The fundamentals are still the same. We still collect data. We just need to know where to look for it. And if things are working, keep spending. A lot of the time, a lot of the clients' accounts that we work on, we find aren't scaling to where they could be. 1, because of a lack of structure, but 2, because of just not knowing what they've actually got in front of them and whether or not they can actually very simply take a budget that was a $500 a day CBO or a $50 a day ad set budget and raise that up to $100 or $150 ad set budget or $1,000 a day CBO. It really can be that simple. You just need to know where to look. And the better you can understand and interpret your data, the more comfortable you will feel about raising and scaling your budgets on a daily basis. Okay. Use this guide. And trust me, from my experience and from doing this for clients and doing this for myself, this has been the number one way we scale campaigns on a very methodical and consistent basis. Based on what the accounts are showing us, based on the performance that we're seeing. If you have any questions about this, again, drop me a comment, leave me a message, whatever you need to do. But hopefully this helps, and happy scaling. See you in the next one.